Hello, everybody. This is Stacy again with LSDS. That's Leader Solutions and Decision Support. There will be a test later. Back with another podcast topic that came up the other day. We'll get into that shortly here. There's a little story behind that. We have repeat guest with us. This is Dr. Kate Colvin. Thank you, Kate, for doing this again.
Thank you for having me again.
Absolutely. Kate was with us before on the podcast, called Intro to Kate Colvin. All right. So you can find that one where she went into more explaining her work with performance psychology, which is really, really interesting. And that's kind of where this topic came up. So Kate, this one came from you. If you could tell us real quick how you came on this topic for us today.
Yeah. So I am currently doing the RV van life, whatever you want to call it, being a nomad. And I'm at a state park volunteering in California. And I'm sure people listening are very much aware of the wildfires that happened recently in the LA area, in Altadena, that area, which I'm not far from at the moment. And watching the news, I saw a lot of people talking about how they didn't know what to grab, right? They got this message that they needed to evacuate their house within 15 minutes was the emergency message a lot of them got. I even got an emergency message to be prepared, and I'm hours away from there, right? And so these folks, I saw the set of parents said that they grabbed their children's teddy bears, and that's all they could think about grabbing in the moment because they just went into tunnel vision and they were stressed and they knew they had to grab things, but she was standing in her closet and looking around and knew that she needed to leave and needed to prepare this bag, but didn't know what to do. And it really just reminded me that in those moments, right, when it hits the fan, we don't necessarily respond very well unless you prepared for that moment. So whether that preparation might be with tools or just how to manage our own physiology in the moment so that when you walk into that closet, knowing you need to grab clothes and get out of your house, you don't get that tunnel vision and you are able to think clearly. And it really, again, that really takes me back to that quote from Mike Tyson that everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. And I'm a huge advocate of absolutely not. Let's have a plan for every single punch, right? Every jab, every kick that can come our way. And with that plan for those punches, that is planning for things such as a wildfire, such as Stacy, you and I were talking about how earlier today there was just a tornado in North Carolina, right? Very, very minor, but in an emergent situation, being able to not just deal but thrive in these stressful situations is imperative.
Absolutely. When we're recording this, it's almost spring. So we're headed into that spring weather, that summer weather. And these are the storm systems. This was our first one for this year that I don't like at all because you have no idea what's coming out of these things. It could be a tornado. It could be wind damage, which can be significant. It could be a lightning strike, anything where you may need to get out of your house immediately. And so is it emergency situation? So I like this managing stress in emergency situations, very relevant topic right now. So lead us into this. What do we need to do to be prepared?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I think we need to be able to not just manage the environment, like grabbing the clothes, grabbing our kids, grabbing the, important items, our pets, but it's being able to manage ourselves, being able to understand how stress impacts our physiology and ability to respond to stress in the moment, and then how to manage that physiology so we can then favorably respond. So, for example, when we look at research showing how our attention, so our ability to focus on the right thing at the right time in the right moment, our ability to pay attention, to focus, is directly impacted most strongly by our heart rate, right? Which is influenced directly by our stress levels. So you get that text message, you get that phone call, you see that news alert that is, hey, this is a high priority evacuation area or level, right? You need to be out within 15 minutes, or the wind is picking up and heading in your direction. Those alerts. Gosh, not even in an emergency situation, but the vagueness of a text message that's like, hey, we need to talk, right? What do those do to your physiology? They are going to create that response, or maybe your heart rate's going to rise, your respiratory rate's going to increase. And when our heart rate gets anywhere between just 115 beats per minute to 145, our ability to manage our attentional processes effectively is drastically reduced, right? And so being able to anticipate, I'm going to get that spike when I get that stimuli in my environment. So first and foremost, how do you respond to stress? So say, if you got that text that said you need to evac within 15 minutes, what do you think initially would happen within your body?
Probably what you mentioned, the heart rate going up. I was actually picturing that as you said it. And I'm like, yeah, there's certain like either text messages you get from even family members that you're like, I need you to call me. That's a good one, right?
Yeah.
You get that
Yeah.
one from certain family members, and you're like, oh, like everything
Yeah.
gets a little quiet, but your heart rate starts going up. I think I do well in emergency situations. However, I will say if there's high winds involved with it, if we're talking a storm system with high winds, that sort of stuff, like,
Yeah.
no, I don't like
Because
that. I don't like that.
because what does that mean? What does that bring with it, the high wind?
Kind of just like an unknown fear, like that is totally out of your
Yep.
control, right?
Unpredictability.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah.
right? So that's that I don't know what the punch is that's coming at me, which
Mhm,
increases in the moment what we would refer to as acute stress. So you get that vague text message from a boss, from a significant other, family member, hey, we need to talk. The next one might be you need to evac within an hour. The next
mhm,
one might be, hey, the winds are shifting. And this is what we saw in California. The winds changed so fast that it was just so unpredictable where the damage was going to take place and how devastating it was going to actually be. So there's different levels of stress. What we're referring to is acute stress. So there's two different types of stress, acute and chronic. And those refer to the different durations and types and how they affect our mind and body. So acute stress, what we are referring to in these more emergent situations, is a short term immediate response to a specific trigger, right? A specific
mhm,
stimuli or situation. And then your body's natural reaction. So you mentioned yours, increased heart rate. I
mhm,
get shaky hands as well. I'll get cotton mouth a lot of the times. And that's our fight or flight response, right? And the severity of the trigger, the stimuli, is going to affect, I guess, how severe that fight or flight response is, right? How
mhm.
fast is your heart rate going to get? How much are you going to freeze in your closet and for how long? That's going to show up in a variety of ways. And so the way that we can basically minimize the acute stressors is being able to anticipate them or plan for them. And so something that we can look at is being able to have, for example, like an egress bag, right? So
Mhm.
having that plan. So looking back to that Mike Tyson quote, maybe that plan is having that bag for you, for your children, for your pets. And one thing I love too is, and Stacey, you've had experience with this, is that through the company there's an opportunity to actually have a consult with a team member and be able to create your own egress bag, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Your own emergency evac bag. And do you want to talk about that really quick, the
Yeah.
preparation for that?
Yeah, those are fun. So they're very customizable. I've never made the same bag twice just because everybody's needs are different depending on where you're living. Are you in the city by yourself with pets? Are you living with family, small kids are involved and pets too? Like on the side of a mountain, like it's just everyone is very different. So we've
Absolutely.
outfitted vehicle egress bags, one that just stays in your vehicle. And so you have something
Oh, I
in there.
love
'Cause
that.
you might
Yeah.
not be at home, right? When it's like storm system, you need to go and just go and get out of a disaster there. So we build them for in your vehicle, in your house, in your office. We've done them for offices too. Kids can have their own version as well. So they'll have their bag that has their clothes, change of clothes in it. It might have like
Mhm.
some snacks in there that are non-perishable, some water supplies. Grab that teddy bear you talked about, but then also grab their bag so they've got supplies
Yeah.
too to go with. So it's just an easy grab in case of emergency. Like, hopefully you never need it. So it's like, oh, all this effort for something
100%.
right, all this effort
Yeah.
for something you hopefully never have to use, but if you do, you just grab it and go. That's it. You don't
Yeah.
have to think about what am I packing now? And
And
then
it's
we'll
and it's the comfort of preparedness, right?
yeah.
So when you get that acute trigger, it's like, okay, cool. I'm good
Mhm,
to go. Like I have what I need. And so the stress response and the impact that it happens quite literally on our body, on our heart rate,
mhm.
physiologically, and the activation of that fight or flight response is going to be less dramatic because you're like, oh, I already anticipated this quote, right? I'm better than Mike Tyson. One thing I do want to highlight is you mentioned your kiddos, you have two sons.
Mhm,
And what I think is also when they're old enough to be aware, but getting them involved in creating their own bags, right? So
mhm.
they feel prepared. They know they have the comfort of knowing what's in that bag and that they have the items that they need to stay safe, to stay fed, to stay hydrated. Because in
Mhm.
those moments, especially as a parent, you're not just managing your own stress, but you're managing the stress of children, maybe as a leader in a workplace. You're not just managing your own stress, you're managing those you lead, right? You're
Mhm.
quite literally serving as someone they're looking up to in those moments. And that can be a direct influence. But so getting people involved, whether it's creating your own egress bags home with your family, or maybe talking about what that evacuation plan might be at work as a leader, and getting people involved in that plan really kind of helps with the, if you're in the know, you're going to be less concerned if it were to hit the fan.
Right? Exactly. And it's entirely possible. So, and I will say too, like we've built bags for people and sent them to them. Also, I've worked with people who we just went over a checklist because people will have a
I
lot
love
of
that.
these things at home already. And so
Yeah.
then we would just cover what they might need to add to that, what they might need to purchase, etc. So they could just tailor it to themselves, but they would do it all themselves. So
Yep.
either way, we can do it all and build it and ship it to you, or just go over the checklist and make sure bases are all covered and then build it on your own type thing. So,
Yeah. And I personally, so again, I'm doing RV van life with 2 dogs and 2 cats. And
mhm,
I actually, with Terry, the owner of the company, I sat down and talked with him and went over the checklist and created what I needed within my own environment to stay safe.
mhm,
And so that was really helpful. So I love the checklist because I had a lot of items already. So
mm.
some buying a whole new bag from Amazon Prime is just a waste of money and space.
See what you have already.
Right? Okay, so let's say that we have what we need in plan or in place, excuse me, whether it is like that step-by-step plan, the family knows what they're doing, whether it's, having the bag in place, knowing what you would want to grab in different scenarios or situations. So we have that to help hopefully reduce the effect of the acute stress response initially, because the level of preparedness will help us stay a bit more calm, help our heart rate stay lower, help us be focused and more attentive to what we need in the moment. But another thing that we need to do is being able to regulate the stress that still exists, right? Or even though you have everything prepared and you know exactly what you need to do, it might not really lower a lot of stress levels. You might still be experiencing the increased heart rate, the shortness of breath, the shaky hands, the tunnel vision, butterflies in your stomach. Some people physically can't move because it's not just fight or flight, but there's also freeze. That's associated with a really
Mhm.
high increase in our heart rate. So we can experience a variety of physical responses due to stress. And so being able to recognize the stress in the moment. So, and this is exactly why, Stacey, I asked you, if you got that text, how would your body respond? What would your response be? We have to first be able to be aware and anticipate what's going to happen before we can regulate. So, there cannot be self regulation without self awareness. So, sitting down, thinking through in various emergent situations, how might I respond? What would happen physically to me? How have I responded in the past? And then more importantly, how do I want to respond, right? So we call this in a performance psychology a reset technique, if you will, a stress reset technique. The 3 R's is what I call it. So we first recognize what that stressful stimuli is, right? So that text coming through, there's a wildfire, there's a tornado, there is whatever emergent situation is happening. Then being able to reset in the moment. So for a lot of folks, what this might look like is quite literally just a deep breath, right? So knowing I'm frozen, I'm standing in the closet, my feet aren't moving. I'm taking that deep breath to tactically, kinesthetically reset my body. So being able to give yourself some kind of physical stimuli can allow us to shift our attention and reduce stress levels. Some folks, you might even see this a lot with athletes. They have a rubber band on their wrist that they might snap. There can be a variety of things for that reset technique, but that we recognize first. We create whatever reset technique it might be. It might be walking out of the closet and then walking back into that closet. And then refocusing or redirection can quite literally just be focus, right? You can just like tell yourself focus. It could be, I'm going to just grab whatever's in front of me and start that process of getting the clothes in the suitcase, whatever that initial strategy needs to be. So we recognize what the threat or what the stressor might be. We identify the reset technique. How are we going to shift our attention? How are you going to pull yourself out of that moment that's unproductive? And then where do we need to refocus our attention? And so those are kind of the three most important steps in really being able to regulate that high acute stress response in these kind of moments.
I like that. It's simple to remember too, with the 3 R's there too. So
Yeah,
that's good notes there for
yeah,
practicing too, because they're smaller, not necessarily acute emergency. So would you recommend
yeah,
to people practicing this lesser, more minor emergencies before you get to
yeah.
something acute, so you understand that reset, practice that,
That's
right? Or how
that's
long would you
I love
recommend
this.
practicing that?
That is such a great question, and then and that doesn't even have to be in emergent situations. What's so cool about the concept of performance psychology is that it's not necessarily domain specific. So we can create these new neural pathways. We can enhance these capacities both neurologically and cognitively, right, within our brain. And then those will transfer to other areas in our life. So, for example, the first thing that comes to mind is Stacey, you and I go way back. You know, I'm a competitive weightlifter. Give me
Mhm.
a barbell and I'm a happy girl. But you tell me I have to run and
Right.
right? Like any top
Acute
like
stress response. I'm there with you.
exactly, right? And I remember you and I on the Murph days running that mile and that closeout mile, and it was like the worst thing. And so I had an entire like so if I'm lifting heavy weights, I'm like, you got this, like I'm stoked, I'm ready to do it. I want to be there. But with running, I think about, gosh, like you have fast twitch muscle fibers. Like you're not built for this. Your legs are so heavy. You're sore from the day before. So I'll have these ineffective thoughts, right? Which in the moment, that surely is not helping my performance. That is harming my performance, right? In the moment, because I'm focusing on all the negative things. If I'm focusing on how heavy my legs are, I'm firing more neurons associated with quite literally the weight response in my legs, which is going to make me focus more on the weight and is going to make them heavier, right? It's like
Mhm.
if you stub your toe and you focus on the pain with the stub toe, you're gonna feel the pain longer than if you distracted yourself, right? So being able to recognize going back to running in the moment, all of those thoughts about how crappy of a runner I am, they're not helping me in the moment. So when I
Mhm.
run, I actually the reason why I brought up the rubber band is I always have a rubber band on my wrist. And my reset technique is I'll snap the rubber band and I tell myself snap out of it. And then I'll quite literally my refocus technique then with running would be to like lean forward, right? Because we know gravity, lean forward is going to help you a little bit more. And I
Mhm.
just focus more on the techniques of running. So recognizing is the thoughts that are going to be working against me of how crappy of a runner I am. My reset technique is snapping the rubber band and taking a breath. And then I focus on the physical cues of like how to run properly within my body. So being able to to recognize and redirect, right, to regulate my brain in this way will allow me to do that in other situations as soon as I recognize that my response is not favorable, because that's all that it is I have stimuli in my environment. I'm recognizing that I have a non-favorable response, and then I'm adjusting my behavior to have a better performance
I like that. So you can practice with these sorts of things all the time. Driving, I'm
all the
sure
time.
for a lot of people
Oh
is very
yeah.
triggering. Anything that triggers you, right? You could recognize,
Yes. Yep.
find your reset, and then
Yep.
refocus yourself. Obviously, that's going to help you, if you ever
Yeah.
do come into an acute emergency situation. So
Yeah.
I like that's
Yeah,
very
the
cool.
road rage, that's honestly a really great one. The where it's the more unpredictable, the better, right? Because these
Mhm.
emergent situations are gonna be unpredictable. So we're looking at those, someone cuts you off in traffic, that so completely unpredictable. You get that super vague text or phone call, completely unpredictable, right? Those are the moments you absolutely want to capitalize on and use as like this isn't just like a learning opportunity. This is a learning opportunity to quite literally develop neural pathways to help me respond better in the future to other situations as low on the acute stress level scale or as high as it might be.
Now, what would you recommend for as far as like effective time or duration for practicing this? Like, can someone see results in just a week or the 30 days make it a habit type thing? Should they ever stop practicing this or what would be your recommendation there?
So these emergent situations, these stimuli, that's going to be more difficult because we can't really control how often they occur, right? So the ability to practice, that's not really within our control. What I would say is start creating like sit down, journal, step back, or even maybe just start as when these situations come up in the moment, start taking note of, oh, this is a trigger for me. This is a trigger for me. And start paying attention to the situations that do cause acute stress where we can use our 3R technique, right? And then
Mhm.
let's use it every single time in those situations. So that would be our goal. So there isn't really a perfect number that I could tell you because it's going to depend on the person, what their acute stressors are, how often they occur, and then we just want to regulate those. And slowly but surely, your response, your stress levels will change, just like a domino effect. The more dominoes you have on a line, the more effective that response is going to be. And so you would have to do it less in the future, right? So the goal would be
Mhm.
we recognize what it is, so we're doing it a lot, and then as we build those new neural pathways, we have to do it less. But they're still there, if that makes sense.
Right, right. Okay, I like that. Make it a
Yeah.
habit and it'll be less because you're getting better at it. So
Exactly. Just kind of like that the deep diaphragmatic breathing. We have to do it consistently. We have to integrate it and make it a new habit. And that's what's so cool. Well, it's so difficult, but what's also so cool about the concept of performance psychology or just psychology in general is that we're creatures of habit and our brains respond very well to the same specific targets, right? So
Mhm.
unless we take purposeful action and make change, we're going to keep doing what we've always done. However, when we make that change and we give our brain the redirection, it is really, I don't want to say easy, but we do fall in line a lot smoother, right? With what
Mhm.
we want these new habits and these new behaviors to be.
I like it. No, this is good.
But then one thing I want to say too is that for any kind of like dealing with stress and being able to do that, and then also for us to be able to solidify and build these new neural pathways, one thing I want to say is so critical that we often miss out on is sleep. So, first and foremost, sleep is where we restore, we recover our energy. That's where memory solidification and all of that kind of good stuff happens with memory.
Mhm.
Consolidation, that's what I was looking for. Solidification, consolidation,
Right.
that's when that happens. And so that is basically these new habits, these new behaviors that we want to learn during our REM sleep cycle. That's when those things are really being laid in and the concrete's being laid, if you will. And so sleep, having proper sleep, 7.5 to 9 hours is going to be really critical for everybody. No excuses.
I'm all about sleep. I'm good at that.
Yes.
I'm a have to have sleep person. It's not good if I don't. So,
Well, and it's honestly a non-negotiable, right? If anybody comes to me and they say, I want to work on enhancing my performance, and I've had, CEOs of companies quite literally that I've worked with, and the first thing I ask them is, "How's your sleep?" And they're kind of taken aback. And if we're not laying that foundation and that groundwork and recovering properly, we can't perform. We can't be activated. And when we're looking at changing these habits and responding well under stress, when we're sleep deprived, any capacity and sleep deprivation, that's actually only classified as 3 or more nights of 6 hours of sleep or less, which is not, I mean, 6 hours is some people barely even get that, right?
mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so your ability to respond properly to stressful events, not just like properly, but in like a speedily manner, doing it correctly, all those things is dramatically reduced when we are experiencing sleep deprivation as well. So that's a big thing to take into account. And with that being said, if anybody's interested, we do have I'm teaching some sleep courses coming up. So if you're listening and sleep is something that is not good for you, I would say go to our show notes and there will be a link in there to the upcoming sleep courses and enroll in that and take a couple minutes to really just see how you can make minor changes that might really allow us to not respond better, just respond better to stress, but perform better overall and have better, health and mental well-being. So take a peek
I
at
will
that.
say I took your last course for that for the sleep
You
course. And
did.
even though consider myself a good sleeper, like I have to sleep. Like that is not I can't skip that. Like, no,
Mhm.
I still came away with so much perspective on how important it is and had better tips too from the things that you shared in that course of how to make
Thank
sure
you.
I'm getting quality sleep. Right.
Yeah.
So that was really helpful, even though I consider myself a good sleeper. Very, very good stuff in that. So, yes, we will in the show notes, we'll have the link for that on the website. And then also the egress bags that we mentioned before, too. I'll throw that
Oh,
link in
yes.
there too. So those will both be in the show notes so people can
Yeah.
just link into that.
Yeah. And even if you just do the consultation and get the checklist for the egress bags, that is so
Mhm.
valuable. I mean, that alone, having that bag and knowing that if anything were to happen, I because even me, so I'm volunteering in the state park and they did control burns last week. And me being here, I was nervous the entire week, every single day, right? When the smoke was happening, because the wildfires had just happened.
Yeah.
California, and there's firefighters, there's people here that they know what they're doing. But I'll be honest with you, I had my egress bag ready to go. I had, my little
Right.
cat backpack ready to go just in case. And just like having them in my eyesight, I can't even tell you how much more comforted I felt. And that was just simply by chatting with someone and getting the checklist and making sure I had the things I needed. At the end of the day, bottom line is that the stress response, and stress is just the mobilization of energy, right? So these different triggers, these different things in our environment, they absolutely affect our ability to operate efficiently in these environments under distress. And so being able to know how to regulate our psychophysiology to be able to thrive in those moments, but also have that level of preparedness and comfort. I mean, those are two things I think that I just really wanted to share. And so thank you so much for the platform and the opportunity to do that during these emergent situations. I think it's so important for people to be aware of.
Absolutely. And I think the timing on this is great too. Like we were talking about before, we're headed into our spring summer season. That's a
Yeah.
time when we see these storms that can get pretty wild just out of nowhere. So it's important to be ready, prepared for whatever's coming
Yeah.
too. Hurricanes too. We see those coming like you have days to prepare, right? But it
Yep.
is very helpful with how much you might have to prepare boarding up the house, blah, 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 depending on the size of the storm, to already
Yeah.
have that egress bag ready to go for the whole family, throw everything in the car and just go. So, no, this was great. But so managing stress in these emergency situations, very, very, very important skill to have. Can save
Yeah.
lives and save you time when it's most important. So, thank you, Kate, for taking the time
Thank
to
you.
dive into this. Again, your sleep course was fantastic. So, I hope people take advantage of that as well. We'll put that in the show notes so folks can just click over to that from there. And
Absolutely.
we look forward to more topics. Keep bringing them.
With all of this, it's so individual, right? Managing all of this. And so and it's
Mhm.
easier said than done. So if you're listening and you're like, I don't know where to start, in addition to just the consultation with the egress bag, I'm always here individually for you guys to reach out to as well through the
Mhm.
company. So we're here as resources for you to make just, thriving a little bit more easy.
Awesome. No, this is great. Thank you all for listening. And we will be
Thank-
back soon. Some other fun topics we come up with, or if anyone has suggestions, feel free to shoot those our way
Yeah.
too. We love chatting about these things and tackling stuff. So you can always email us at safety@lsds.us. We've got several eyes on that email. Also, you can contact us through the website, which is lsds.us as well. And again, in those show notes, I'll throw the links in there too for the sleep class. And we have a leadership class too on there that we were talking about before, and also to our egress bag site there. Again, thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon.